This forum is intended to feature a 360-degree view as to the feasibility of electric vehicles. But many would argue the cornerstone to the widespread adoption of EVs is in fact economically viable charging infrastructure. And to shed more light on the subject, we're joined by a very special guest and one of the eminent thought leaders in the sector. Please join me in welcoming the head of electric vehicle charging at ABB Global Businesses and one of the leading contributors shaping charging network operator Electrify America. I ask that you please put your hands together for Frank Muehlon.
So, very warm welcome also from my side. I'm very excited to be here, seeing this amount of people actually joining the conclave. And I hope that by the end of the day we will have a bit of white smoke coming out, so as the name suggests. So let me dive you into Eby Infrastructure and to see how Eby Infrastructure developed and how we see it from a market leader's perspective. If we look into e-mobility, I mean, we sit here and say, look, this is something really great, this is something really new. Just to boil it down a little bit at the start. It's new, but probably not that new. It's the technology in itself is more than 100 years old. And the electrons still flow in the similar way than more than 100 years ago. And so coming from trams, or even Ford in Detroit in the 1910s had the first electric vehicle. It's just that a different technology on the combustion engines, the ICE technology, took over, and for good reasons, so not for bad reasons, for good reasons, but now we need to see that we turn it again and come back to a technology which has significantly evolved. Now, how do we see this going forward? It's of course, we can talk a lot about the infrastructure, but if we talk infrastructure, for what do we have the infrastructure? So this picture shows you the development of the cars, which actually we want to charge. Now, these are models in Europe and North America, so excluding China in that case, but you see a strong evolving here from early adoption vehicles with smaller batteries and only AC charged, going upwards to more and more cars, more and more vehicles hitting the market with larger batteries, and like this then also a higher ability to charge, which of course is a demand on the infrastructure. And you also see a clear shift in terms of standards towards a CCS standard, and still a couple of cars on the CHAdeMO standard. So that's quite an interesting picture to see. And with this, let's look at one of the cars, what it means. You all heard probably about the Tesla Model 3 hitting the market. I do not want to make a commercial here for Tesla, don't get me wrong, but I want to show what that means in a certain market segment. Here in the United States, actually, this model now, this one car got 52% market share in a certain segment. So I believe that a car like this is not a mass vehicle, for sure not, but it shows that it can really kick some ass, right? Sorry for my word, but it can really do. Yeah? And it shows also that electric cars are beyond the point of being something, can I really drive, does it work, or do I have the infrastructure? We can come to a point that all of this can come behind us actually, so that we move ahead much more bullish. So if we look now to the growth of electromobility, this is a projection. You can look at it very precisely, but I have to tell you it's wrong anyway. I'm sorry. I mean, this is wrong, right? There is no right projection. The only right projection I can give you is that we will see a significant growth, and that we're somewhere right now still in a phase of early adoption, globally early adoption. So You might say, in India is still even less electric vehicles. That's right, but on the whole globe, it's an early adoption phase. We see growing acceptance somewhere the next coming years, and then really mass adoption kicking in. And you can also see on that mass adoption, India will play a significant role in our projection, which is, I think, which is important. The drivers for that are globally the same. It's government policies. It's for sure the environment, and I hope that we all can agree on this, that we do it for a better planet. It's the technology which moves ahead, which gives us larger batteries with a higher cycle resistance and a quicker ability to charge. And last but not least, and I think this is the most important, and Nabil said it in his opening speech as well, and obviously the report from KPMG shows as well, it's the economy, right? So the economics. You will not drive electric if you have to pay more. You won't. Simply you won't. So what all we put in place on subsidies, on policies, doesn't help. It only helps to get it started. And probably we need that help. So I'm not saying we don't need it. We need that help, but we need it only to get it started. And then it has to become self-sustained. And the technology will help us in doing that. And the outcome is then not only on the economical side, but hopefully then the outcome is that we all do something good for the planet. The challenges, and we can do that quick, the challenges today are still high purchase price of electric vehicles, a lack of infrastructure, and also, that's a point I want to mention, still a low availability of the right products. So it's not that you can go out there and have a free choice today. So you do not yet have a free choice. I want to drive this car. Do I want to drive on which type of combustion engine or which type of electrical vehicle and which size of battery do I want? This choice, unfortunately, is not yet there. So we also have to make sure that this will be changed. And if we now look a bit in the overall trends, we have trends in the mobility sector and we have trends in the energy sector. And we have to make sure that those trends come together and that we make the get together of those trends, that we make them play in our advantage. So on the mobility side, it's the ACEs. So autonomous, connected, shared, and electrified. And I think a colleague from Bosch will elaborate on that much deeper later on. So if you look at the energy side, on the other hand, there we see that energy becomes much more distributed and decentralized, and luckily also decarbonized. And in order to still manage that flow of energy, it also becomes much more digitalized. And so if we bring that together, I think we have the chance and the ability to create a completely new ecosystem. And that's also what we need then, essentially, on the e-mobility side, is we need to have affordable cars, we need to have infrastructure in place, we might need grid enforcement, for sure, and all of that only makes sense if we generate the power we consume from renewable energy. Because you sure don't want to burn coal in order to drive electric. I mean, that should not be the target, right? So that's also important. If you look here in India, I understand we have right now about 15–16% of the energy consumption is out of renewable energy. So the target is, I think, to bring that up to 40% over the next couple of years. So that is, of course, great. That reduces the dependency on oil import, but it also helps then to create an ecosystem when you drive electrical to really do something good for the planet. Now, look into charging infrastructure, the topic of this discussion. When we look to charging infrastructure, it's not all the same. We have really, within infrastructure, different segments, and we need to be aware of these different segments. So you have the situation that, of course, your car, your vehicle is not so often on the road as you wish, right? So in the most of the time, it's actually standing somewhere. And if it's standing and sitting somewhere, the easiest way to charge is and the best way for the battery is a slow charge with an AC charger. That's simple, cheap, available power, usually. Unless you have larger sites and hundreds of vehicles there, then you have, of course, need a different logic and smart charging. But that's the AC charging we call destination charging. Then you have a segment where you are for a couple of hours, 1 to 3 hours, or like you're shopping or whatever. In that range, and that's very interesting because that goes into cities. And there you have charging between, of course, on a DC level, fast charge between 20 kilowatt and we would say up to 50 kilowatt, what is essential. And it can also go to 80, I think that doesn't matter really. And then we have the last segment, which is high power charging. This, when you have the right cars on the street, who can soak up this energy, that's of course the precondition. Or we talk about buses, which is essentially the same technology. And there is charging beyond 150 kW. So this is really different segments. So it's not one charger like the other. You have to look in the different segments and have to draw up the infrastructure and the solution you need for your use case. And needless to say, we play in all those segments. So if we now look into the charging infrastructure from a different point of view, you all heard there is multiple standards out there, right? I mean, there is... If I just look roughly for cars, we have the CCS standard, we have the CHAdeMO standard, we have the Tesla standard, we have the GBT standard in China, then we have different AC standards. Now every standard is going to improve further and so on. So if we look into that, what do we regard as a right way forward from an infrastructure provider? Because I can say, look, I provide you the charging infrastructure. I don't care which plug you use, right? I mean, that's not what I should care about. But still, I have an opinion, and my opinion here is, of course, if we want to bring the industry forward, we should bring it forward in terms of harmonizing standards and using standards which are safe, and standards which have been thoroughly tested, and standards which are scalable. And so seeing this, I'm actually very happy that I see some consensus here in India to merge kind of the standards towards the international standards of CCS and CHAdeMO, because it will help Indian manufacturers also, if you produce cars, to be scalable and not to have an own standard only for India on a lower power range, which was at least discussed before. So like this, you're scalable and you can tap into safe standards which are very well and thoroughly tested. So just to give you an example of rollouts for charging infrastructure where it's a bit more mature. So this is just some pictures just to see for you. This is all 50 kilowatt chargers on different places in Europe or the United States, mainly in neighborhoods or on highways. So this is how it can look like. Now, this is going beyond now already. We started 2017 with high power charging. 150 kilowatt upwards. So this shows some example, and I just want to show you that it's also how we go into this. There's a site with one of our customers, operators in the United States, EVgo. We put a site out there on the stretch between LA and Las Vegas, very hot Nevada desert, so extremely nice for testing. We put one at a very high frequent location with a high usage in close to Amsterdam. Where there is a high electrification rate already, and we put one, or not one, a couple actually, in test centers of car OEMs in northern Sweden. Yeah? So really to test that thoroughly, and then we're quite happy and lucky, and was also mentioned, to be the first ones globally who came out with an extremely high power charging infrastructure, 350 kW, liquid cooled cables, and we're partnering here with the operator Electrify America, and to roll out across the United States. We did then pretty much the same in Europe with Ionity as well, and other networks. But important thing here is really first to market, and that is a technology you probably hear a lot about and read a lot about, but it's live. It's out there, it's existing, it's in use, and from the infrastructure side, cars can be charged like that. What is now still missing for 350 kW, to be completely frank with you, is the cars. So the cars so far cannot take all of that energy yet. Vehicles which can take this energy is on the public transportation side. It's buses and trucks. And for buses and trucks, we actually see a big trend going forward. Understand also BYD is sponsoring here this event, which is also good. It's one of the large manufacturers, of course. We have here I brought a nice example for you, which I like a lot because it's stretching between two cities. So it's not just one city, so it's two different policymakers stretching across the city. In that case, it's a project we did together with Volvo. And also here we try to use open standards for charging. The way it's done here is with an opportunity charge. So why we think that is a good system? We think so because you can make the battery inside the bus a bit smaller and can charge at an end stop of a track, right? So instead of carrying less passengers and more battery weight, you have the chance to put more passengers on the bus. And of course, the investment into the bus is lower because the battery is a significant amount. So, at an end stop, usually the drivers have a couple of minutes overlay in a couple of minutes with up to, actually here we go up to 450 kW to date and plan to 600 kW, can even talk about a megawatt. So technology-wise, it's not a problem. So you really have a charge up within minutes. So that's quite nice. Similar projects on the standard where actually you can connect now different OEM brands as well. So we did one of those in Norway, so just as another reference. Now, on infrastructure, if we talk infrastructure, and I was mentioning earlier that because of decarbonization, decentralization, everything becomes more digital. So if you put infrastructure out there, we have to make sure this infrastructure is digital. So digital in a sense that the data generated is kind of uploaded and can be used. So what do you need to use it for? For sure, you don't want to give the energy for free, right? So you want to charge for the energy. So you need to have a back end which enables you payment. Also, you probably want to do a smart charging, so how much energy you can give, etc. And also, the charging infrastructure is not necessarily manned. It's most of the time it's unmanned and it's used by the consumer only. So it's very important you have a good monitoring of the status. Is that station up and running or does it have a problem? If it has a problem, it would of course be good to fix that problem. And that can be done in a lot of cases remotely. So to have a digital infrastructure, we think is really key. Yeah? So a bit of power electronics to put out there is easy. To put it out there really in an intelligent way makes it more difficult, but much more rewardable, and from a total cost of ownership and from a sustainability point of view, also much better. Now to draw the picture a little bit wider from the single piece of charger to a more holistic infrastructure point of view, there's a couple of questions to be answered, of course. Do we have enough energy available at the end? Can we produce enough to fulfill the demand we have? And is this energy, is that hopefully green energy we produce? Can we distribute this energy in the right way? So do we have enough transmission and distribution capacity? So is the grid strong enough? So this is questions we have to answer, and it's the typical questions. It's somehow it's easy to come up with a first infrastructure. You put your first charger here, the first charger there. It's not a big impact. But if you change the whole fleet, or if you use the word fleet, if you have a fleet operation, someone with a taxi fleet and you need a lot of charging on one location, of course probably your substation is not big enough anymore. So you need to upgrade that as well. And which is a good thing because probably you might need to do that anyway. So you can just combine it. And this is even more important that when we see the grid starting to shift. All the traditional grids, you have one source of generation, and you go via substation and substation into finally into the building or finally into the point of use. We see that going forward much more decentralized. We see much more the world of what we call a prosumer, so someone producing energy but consuming the energy at the same time. And if you have abundance of energy, you can also sell the energy. And now driving it a bit wider in terms of infrastructure, if you have cars out there with large batteries, probably you have cars with batteries, or probably you have batteries with wheels. You can look at it either way. You can also make use of those batteries. You can make much better use of them, and in terms, for example, also to store energy or to give energy in case of shortages. This new grid, of course, needs to be much more digital than it is today in that simple top-down approach, but it offers also much more, let's say, it's much more rewarding in terms of usage of renewable energy and in terms of efficiency. So if you then bring that a bit wider as well, you come to sites, actually, and to charging sites. And a charging site, of course, again, you can say you only have a charger, but probably you have sites where you have much more in use. You have solar. You saw on a couple of pictures that solar is a nice installation on the roofs of charging infrastructure. So probably you generate electrical energy, or you have a solar field probably beside a charging station. You have storage because you need to store all of that. Or probably you're in a building, in a larger building. So how do you manage the energy consumption in the building when you have charging needs? So to give you a figure, this can be up to 50% of the energy consumption of the building. So it's not small, it's not a small add-on. You need really to make sure this is well integrated with the energy management of the building. And of course, this technology is all out there and available, right? So what I want to show with this picture is that we really have to think beyond a charger and a charging gun or whatever. We really have, it's a much more complex picture we see here. Now, there's also a fun part to it. The fun part is there is now a race series called ABB Formula E. So ABB is title sponsor of the Formula E. And this race series is getting a really good traction. I just back from Mexico. Last weekend was the race in Mexico. The next one, if any one of you is interested, will be in Hong Kong, 9th of March. So it's really great. We see now a lot of drivers also coming across from Formula One. Felipe Massa now joining in. Now a lot of car manufacturers actually join in there as well. So this season we have BMW in there. Audi was in there since longer. Mahindra is in there. Actually, very sad. The Mahindra driver was in Mexico starting from pole position in the qualifying, and he was leading the race till the last second. But then, unfortunately, the battery ran out of power on the last second. And the Audi driver, Luca Di Grassi, who had just 1% battery left, but this was more than the zero, overtook him and won the race. So, unfortunately, else Mahindra would have won the race. It's actually a really nice race series, and I can just encourage you to watch that. And before this race, there is one which is more with normal cars. The Jaguar I-Pace is a nice EV which is out there now. I-Pace, they do kind of a trophy before the Formula E and have a race basically with street cars, if you like. And so we have a partnership to charge those cars there. And we also took our street charger, our 50 kilowatt charger, modified it a bit for the race purposes, just like Jaguar modified the car a little bit for race purposes. And we used that. And now was the second race. The first race was in Riyadh. and the second now in Mexico. It's quite fascinating, and actually this charger we did here in India, so just for you. We see India really coming up and hopefully take a good role in electromobility, so this is why we start to have those activities here, and I hope to hear much more of this. So for all of us, I think that should be the theme of such a conclave. It's not me standing here and preaching about infrastructure or anyone else preaching about a different topic. It's at the end, it's a lot of pieces of a big puzzle which have to come together, and so we only can make that world a greener place or can run the world without consuming the earth if we really work hand in hand together. So let's write the future together in electric infrastructure. Thank you. So if I got it right, there is time for questions or so.
Are there any questions for Sir? It's not every day we have the opportunity to have him right in front of us. So if there are questions, we'll have a mic circulating in the audience. And I ask that you please raise your hand and introduce yourself.
Good morning, sir. This is Mayuk Chaudhary from the KPMG team. We've been working on electric vehicles ourselves for the past couple of years. Some fascinating insights from your talk. A question, you mentioned that as we know, ABB has tied up with the likes of EVgo in markets like the United States to set up the charging infrastructure. What's your view on the kind of operating model and the business models that ABB sees will lead the change for charging infrastructure creation in the Indian scenario? How do you see that evolve for ABB? That's the limited question, sir.
Yeah. My view here is that the most successful models we see right now is rollouts from private startups, actually, who really focus on that segment. So it's not the amount of money behind yet, like in other companies, but it's good to get an early grip on the market. So the EVgo model is pretty successful. I would wish for something similar here in India, and I'm quite confident that we will see this happening. I'm quite confident, and this is one thing. But if you want to come really big, then at a certain point in time, you also need bigger players to come in. Yeah? So, and that might merge going forward, but not as the early starters. So the big utilities or the big oil and gas are not necessarily the ones starting it up. So you need both. Yeah?
This is Amit Ranjan Verma from Sarka IIT Delhi. I have one question regarding the swapping system of battery. You are providing the infrastructure for charging. How do you see that swapping of battery is helpful in India?
Swapping batteries?
Yeah.
It's a nightmare, sorry. I know it's heavily discussed, but I'm not a friend of battery swap at all. It's, to me, you see, I like the direct way, yeah? So to go really straight and direct to charge and not to have a different mechanism which you need to take out a battery from a car and still have to charge it. There is, of course, benefits. I do see that from a speed point of view. Probably that can be faster, but it can only be faster based on today's battery technology, which will be overcome in a couple of years, hopefully. Another benefit is then that you can charge this battery in a slower manner, which probably increases the lifetime. So I see these benefits, but the downsides of having much more capital in the whole system, because you have to have a multiple of batteries out there, and the battery is the most expensive piece in that equipment. So I think plus the mechanics to change, plus the probable standardization you need across different car models, I think I said enough. I'm not a friend of that. Yeah.
Hello, good morning everybody. I am from Pune, Priya Munshi. Actually, I have one simple query. You are discussing about DC high power 150 to 350 kilowatt plus charging station. It takes time up to 10 to 20 minutes, I think. It is a fast charging, right? Mm-hmm. Is it possible in India? What is the economical range of that.
Yeah, so if I get it right, it's about the charging speed in minutes, right?
Yeah.
So that,
Sorry.
of course, depends on, of course, it's possible also in India. That's not the point. It's the possibility depends really on the whole ecosystem, how you put it together. So you need to have a charger which is capable to deliver that speed, which we define in the kilowatt it can deliver based on a high amperage. So if you say a couple of minutes, in 8 minutes for 200 kilometers, so that's what we say for 350 kW charge. So that is somewhere between 400 and 500 amps. So you need to have a battery which can take that up. So in terms of C rates, or the battery needs to be large enough. So the first car which will hit the market, actually, which can take that, is expected end of 2019. Will be a very high-level car, high-end car. It will be the Porsche Taycan. So let's see when they come with this. But of course, there is collaborations across the industry and the battery manufacturers, and we see, at least on the horizon, batteries which can take higher C rates, and then, of course, this is possible. So now this is between the car and the charger. The other question is regarding the infrastructure and the grid availability. And here it's a question of, I think that is when the time tells. I think, but on the infrastructure side there is probably the battery. You probably need to buffer it with a battery in between to be able. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. I hope I am allowed one last question. My name is Brieux and I'm working at BASF. I have a question regarding convenience. If we think about convenience, I think the best solution would be to charge the battery while driving. And I wonder if you can share with us some ideas whether technology is already available, so we don't have to stop and charge a battery, but we can recharge while driving.
Yeah, I mean, that is a different topic. I think when you want to charge whilst you drive, there's two ways. Again, there's conductive and inductive. If you want to do that conductive, that's what you see on trams, right? That's a conductive charge whilst you drive. I don't think we want to have that for cars. So it's probably then inductive. If you go inductive, the technologies we see so far are rather on a lower power level. So that means whilst driving, you would need really to dig up thousands of kilometers of road to put coils underneath, which we don't see as viable. So it's then more probably when you stand instead of when you drive. So there could be solutions especially for fleets, for taxi fleets, when they wait at airports or whatever. So this is possible. However, that would require a further standardization going forward, which we don't see right now. And that's kind of the precondition. Yeah. Thank you very much, and hope for a nice conclave. Yeah.